All right. Hi, everyone. How are we doing this fine afternoon? Wonderful. I'm very excited to have you here with me doing this breakout session on experience audits. If you might have noticed in the big ideas session, I seem to like the word experience, so you'll hear that a lot in the next couple minutes here. How are we all feeling? Good? All right. Got a minute to go to the bathroom, stretch, get some libations. Me too. I actually even stepped outside for a second, did like a spin in the sun, and I was like, oh, glorious day. I just traveled in from Chicago, and it was the wildest, typical Chicago, wildest weather week. One day we're wearing full winter coats and hats, and the next it was like roll up the sleeves because you're getting sunburn and you want to make sure you're not getting a farmer's tan, as they say, or a golfer's tan, whatever you fancy. So I'm going to start us off with a quick little story here. One day, there was an older fish swimming along, and they were enjoying the sea and having a nice afternoon, and come upon a group of little fish, younger fish, the youngins, they say. And the older fish looked at the younger fish and said, "Hello, how's the water today? Have a good one. We'll see you all later." Got you all there, John. And the younger fish swim away, and you're like, "Oh, you too, uh-huh. And like, what the heck is water? That is experience. Experience is water. It's all around us, and most of the time, we're not actively aware of it because it's happening whether we're paying attention or not. And that's part of the excitement of kind of breaking into something and raising our awareness of what's going on around us, and then making active choices about influencing our own individual experiences of our clients, or designing experience with action, intention, and choice. I'm not going to go too far into my background because you all, now it's stuck in my head. See, we're mimicking, we've got things stuck, they stay there. You've just seen me speak, you've heard a little bit about me, but this is up so you can find me online if you're interested. Tweet, Instagram. I really only use Twitter when I go to events. I don't really know how to do Twitter otherwise. Heard a little bit about the family, heard a little bit about the company. I kept this slide in for a specific reason because I wanted to speak to something John had said, because I heard a lot of concern in a lot of the work that we do with Forward Collective for Women in Diversity is about proactive choice and understanding our bias. So while you can't override your biases or your system one, you can become aware of them. And as you become aware, you then make active choices to address those biases, and you practice creating space for when situations happen that your biases may come up. So you have time to cycle through that bias and then actively participate in the experience and make a choice about your current interaction or your reactions. So it's about finding that opportunity for choice by creating space. So I'm going to say that again because I know there's a lot of nuances there, and this is not in the slides because I just wrote it down. But you cannot override system one. You can't override your biases. They're things that we grew up with them, they're ingrained in us. They'll be there and you'll find them, you'll react to them. So you can't override system one, but you can become aware of it. And you can make active choices to address those biases and to practice creating space for you to cycle through that system one, that bias, and actively participate in the experience that you're having. And so you can then make a choice about how you react or interact in that space and with the individuals you're around. We don't always have time. We don't always have space. We can't always go through that. But there is this guilt that we have around our biases. And I don't want the beauty of all the things that we learned from John for that to be the one thing. Because at first I was like, wait a second, that's not true. And I'm like, oh, it actually is. Like, I understand I'm not going to disagree with the scholar on this, but I will offer a glimpse of hope into the fact that, well, there are things that we won't be able to change, and they're just science and the way they're there. Things are always being proven wrong by practicing different ways and or creating space to kind of participate in that. So I hope you don't mind, John. I took a little liberty there and added that in. What is experience? Got it back up here just to give ourselves a refresher. We all know about it, but it can be used in such a dynamic way. We talked about words John with the linguistics and what we choose. And it's very interesting in doing some of the research to prepare the presentation. And Ryan called me up and was like, hey, I know you're doing that big ideas session, but what about adding a little bit of a breakout? So forgive me, there's going to be some repetitive slides, but I hope they're here as a kind of learning together moment. So experience is a word that in the English language is one word. But in German, there are many, and I'm not going to pretend I can speak German and start rattling them off. There are many variations of the word experience when we're talking about our tenure, our shared understanding, our feelings, or active engagement. The experience we're focusing on today is active engagement, but it's important to kind of understand how the word sometimes then becomes like, oh, we're doing experiential, experience design, client experience, blah, 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 blah. So if it starts to sound like that, let's just give our brains a break and understand we mean different things at different times. This is what we talked about a little bit ago. Do you guys feel like you have a good understanding? Do you all, excuse me, I'm linguistically trying to work away from the word you guys. Do you all, do you folks, does everyone feel like we have an understanding of this, or would you like me to read it out quickly just for a refresher? This is an interactive presentation, by the way. Yeah, good. Don't read it. We feel good? Okay. If you want to, I can always go back, take a picture of it, all those things. Experience design, I will read because it's important. That's kind of the next little bit here, is the process of intentionally orchestrating experience elements to provide opportunities for participants to co-create and sustain interactions that lead to results desired by the participant and the designer. So we looked at this diagram a little bit earlier. We're going to spend a little bit more time here, understanding the collective elements of what goes into experience design. It's at the core of all of these different experiences that we discussed. And what usually gets left out when we talk about client experience versus experience design, and then we get into our web experience, is really meeting the individual where they are at, so that when they're coming to the understanding of what's happening, they're able to kind of break down the concepts in a way that, going back to language, translates into their own dialect, their own thinking, because we have different ways of processing. So we're trying to kind of bridge the gap between processing while understanding experience design where we can. Client experience, customer experience is done 2 and 4, which is important. This is not to say we shouldn't be doing that. We got to be doing a lot of things for our clients, but experience design is done with them. So how do we engage them in the process? We talked about framing. Does everyone feel good about that? Cool. Talked about the rule of the under-promise. Everyone's seen that one. Oh, really classy. Be considerate. They're all just up here as a quick refresher, but we're going through about being intentional with our inclusion and our considerations, how X impacts Y. I know I'm going quickly through some of this, but we've discussed the idea of that checkpoint. It's a video game that you're familiar with. What does that mean? Well, we all know that things are happening around us. The experiences are going on whether we choose to participate in them or not. Is the chair comfortable? Mine wasn't for me. I was like shifting. I'm paying attention to John's talk. I'm looking at it like somehow the bar in the chair was like digging into the back of my leg. So I was moving, I was doing this. It was actually tricky because it was causing me a delay in paying attention, right? So there's little things like that that we can always kind of go into. And why we audit that is because experience design is fundamentally the design of time, the way we spend our time and how we plan for that time in a way that meaningfully allows people and individuals to work with us. And when we think of customer experience, a lot of times we're looking to save people time. This is the quickest. We can get this. We're going to get this done. We can do that, which is actually the antithesis of what you want from experience design. Because experience design is we want people to value the time they spend with us. We want them to look forward to the time that they're spending with us. And while we do want to accommodate the fact that we want to respect people's time and be respectful of how we're using the time together, we want them to come back because they liked it, not because it was the quickest thing. While that's a checkbox and good business is being efficient and optimizing, that's not necessarily the goal. The goal is for them to have the memory that it was good, not, well, it was the quickest, so I'll go back. That you'll win business for being the quickest, but you won't be the one that they come back to and that they always recommend from that feeling. So we have our attitudes. Attitudes drive behaviors, and behaviors deliver results. This is a slide that I stole from someone's Oracle presentation. I liked it. Behaviors influence our experiences, and experiences influence our attitudes. So just kind of a good understanding, break down some of these really, really commonplace things that we hear often, but don't always think about the interrelated nature of how they work together and the cyclical factor of how everything kind of comes back and then comes back around. So there's two sides of self, and I'm going to walk over to my notes here because I have some things I want to make sure that I focus on for everybody here. We have our experiencing self and then our remembering self. Have any of you heard of this before, this kind of dichotomy of self? Show of hands. Seeing a couple heads nod yes. Okay. So I actually took a picture of John's slide, threw it up there. Not stealing it. Credit this guy right here. The self has two systems, your intuitive and your deliberate. So your intuitive system is kind of what's happening. You're experiencing it. It's in real time. It's what's going on. Next, you have your deliberate. Those are your active choices. This plays a little bit into what we're talking about here with the experiencing self and your remembering self. So your experiencing self is what's happening right now. It is, and I'm just going to read off for you all here because I want to make sure I say it perfectly with what we have here. So it's what's connected to the present moment, perceiving all the sensory inputs in 3-second intervals. I am, for example, if this was me and I'm sitting outside, I could say that my experiencing self is hearing the cars passing by my house. Maybe it's raining outside and I'm typing and I can feel it on my keyboards. Right now, my experiencing self is a little chilly because I'm in this room. I went outside. I'm holding this microphone. It feels a little heavy in my hand. I'm also trying to reach for my keyboard so I can know what to switch. You're here, you're looking the lights, you're checking out everything that's going on, you're taking in the fact that now this slide is a bright color versus the one before that, and that may have caught your eyes a little bit differently. Those are all little things that change the way that you perceive what's up there, what's happening. So you won't remember these momentary impressions. They will be overwritten by the ones that you experience right after that. But your remembering self is the part of us that creates the stories about what has happened to us. And this is the part that reflects by the end of the day and recalls all the things that happened and then puts judgment on the things that happened and then regards that in a way that adds a memory for that experience and creates kind of an impression of what's going on. So the remembering self is the storyteller, and that determines how we assess the events that occur in our lives, including our interactions with numerous companies and brands. And this is the part of ourselves that ultimately determines whether we are happy about a given product or service or not. And what's interesting about this is it goes back to John. I love that you went first because we have all of these great synergies. That study that John talked about with the 60 seconds of the pain. You know, there's people that experienced pain for a little bit longer, but it was less pain at the end, and they just remembered, okay, it wasn't as bad, versus the people that had a spike of pain at the end. So it really is crazy, wild, how we interact with the experiencing and remembering self. And the remembering self then is not acting only based on the moment-to-moment reporting from the experiencing self. It decides before we experience something what you anticipate for that experience. So I'm going to give some examples of this because I know it's kind of like woo-woo back and forth, a lot of craziness. But we humans tend to often subconsciously envision what kind of memory we are going to have at the end of a certain experience. So I'm going to repeat that because I think when you look at this graph, it'll make a little bit more sense of like where the dips and dives and ducks and dodges, if you like dodgeball, there you go. We envision subconsciously what kind of memory we are going to have at the end of a certain experience. All right, I got my little clicker back here. So with that, there's an equation that we can kind of learn to understand this. So the impressions of the experiencing self divided by the expectations that we have become the memories of the remembering self. I have a lot of different resources that I can share. This is from a book called The Umami Strategy, UMAMI, by Aga Sorstek. I think I said that correct. I've been practicing how to pronounce her name because I think she's brilliant. And she digs into a lot of experience design strategy and different things like that. But we're going to go into some examples here of required places that we've all been, so we can kind of get an understanding. So remembering self. Hey, when we go to the airport, what does the airport make you think of? Anybody? Busy? Stress, security, traveling, time, kind of idle time, having to unpack. Maybe your TSA pre-check, so you don't have to take off your shoes and your laptop anymore, but you're still like, what if I don't get in that line? How does this go? Maybe there's an anticipation of a misunderstanding because things are always changing. How does that make you feel to go to the airport or talk about the airport? When I brought up the airport, I noticed a couple of people's shoulders went up. I saw a couple of people kind of tense. We shifted in our seats a little bit. What are your feelings? You want to give me some words? Nervous? Stress? We notice like the levels in our brains change a little just by mentioning the word airport. What other types of experiences have we had at the airport? Has anyone had a really great experience at the airport? Ryan, do you want to talk about it? Was there something specific what made it great?
We're on a Southwest flight, and whether something like this delayed 3 hours, 4 hours, or just get stuck in the airport waiting. My wife was traveling with me on that trip, and talk about time.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of time is really a lot slower when you're waiting.
Yeah.
In Southwest, we had a gate agent, and I started playing games with those waiting. She was like, I got a free set of headphones. If you could bring me a playlist that has Mozart, Tupac, and, Swift, or like random. That's my running list. And she pulled it up.
Oh my goodness.
So that passage of time,
Mm-hmm.
waiting is really late. They had just done a really neat job of engaging those who were waiting in distractions. So the passage of time didn't feel awful.
It felt good. It was fun. So Ryan's example, just a quick recap, is he's at the gate, stuck there for 3 hours. We've all been there. And the gate agent, rather than just making the obligatory, hey, sorry, we're going to be delayed, or this is what's going on, starts to play some games, has fun with it. They're stuck there too. They're twiddling their thumbs, waiting. They're also in a spot of anticipation of passengers that are frustrated coming up to them. What's next? What am I going to do? So rather than just waiting for people to be more and more upset, this gate agent now created a game and said, okay, anyone who has a playlist that has Mozart and Tupac on it, bring it up, and you win a pair of headphones. Okay, anybody that's got this, let's go, let's go, let's go. So now you have people, you're creating an energy, you're creating a moment where you're now sharing something that, while you're still stuck there, you're now laughing about it. And you're like, okay, well, there's nothing we can change about certain things, but now it can be a little bit better. Anybody else have a good memory, a good thing? Yeah.
It's a good memory, but if you've ever flown to Palm Springs, California, to the Sunny Bono, it always cracks me up. The majority of that airport terminal is outside.
Okay.
Just like canopies, etc. And so when you just, this is the coolest airport ever. I don't feel like I'm in this box.
Yeah.
Cattle herding me along with a ton of people. So that was really just a good space and gave me an experience. The best experience is we were missing a connecting flight, really close. They put us on a baggage cart and drove us across the tarmac airplane, and we went up a set of steps.
And something cool that you're probably like, I've never gotten to ride on a baggage cart.
Sitting on somebody's luggage.
So that was just an example, and to repeat really quickly, to recap, is you expect to be at the airport. We expect the airport to be closed, stuffy, no windows, no open air, probably not going to see any trees unless they have a few planted somewhere. And he got off the plane, and it was an open air airport. So you're, in a good day, kissed by the sun as you get off the plane. Maybe you feel a little of the ocean breeze in your hair because you're in Florida. You're hanging out on the tarmac for a minute, and I don't know, boys, girls, any gender, there is still something really cool about being around an airplane on the tarmac. Like there's a level of access that you don't usually get unless you work there. So there's these restricted areas that you don't get to go and check out. And now you're kind of like, oh my God, I'm here, check that out. Look at that wheel, it's as tall as me, what's happening? So there's things going on that, well, if you work there, are commonplace, are part of the everyday and become a bit of the drudgery. could be really cool for other people to experience because they don't get that behind the scenes interaction. They don't get that moment. And then writing on a baggage card, I mean, I'm sure that's a story that you can tell in like 2 Truths and a Lie icebreaker at a party. Be like, okay, here's a fun one. Who's wrote on a baggage card? Never have I ever, you know? So kind of incorporating those things. So it's about kind of understanding the anticipation of the remembering self is to go to the airport already kind of shoulders shrugged up, like a little like, all right, we got to get through this. And then you find an airport that delights you, that actually snaps you out of your remembering self and puts you in your body to live in the experience and create new memories of that experience. So it gets heady. There's a lot of stuff going on because let me tell you, I've been stuck in the cycle before. I'm like, oh my God, it's happening. What's going on? Where are we at? How do we remember? So it's easy to get stuck in the cycles of it all, but it's just kind of finding little moments and little ways to engage. So a quick other one so that we can kind of bring this to a different industry, but we're sticking with hospitality because it's the easiest to identify in quick examples that everyone can relate to. Hotel versus motel. What does a hotel make you feel like? Upscale, safe, clean. Motel? The opposite. Poor, side of the highway. We've all seen movies. We don't want to think about all the things that we've seen in the movies at random motels. So we understand why is because of our remembering selves. And sometimes our remembering selves, it's not even something that happened to us. It's something that we saw in a movie. So we remember that. It's something we saw on the news, which is dangerous because that's how further biases can be created. That's how deeper dive into things that we haven't even truly experienced, but it's part of the otherness that can become complex. That gets into some of the DEI work that I do and kind of thinking about the differences of self and bias and how that unpacks. But we also then work from hearsay. So whether it's the news or a movie, our friends will tell us, oh, well, I'm never going to go to that hotel because my friend had a bad experience. They said the bed was, the dishes, you don't get dishes very often. The bed wasn't clean. I don't know. I don't want to start thinking about all that stuff. So we'll not go too far down that path. But yuck, right? We don't want to do it. We're not going to go there. The key differences come between 2 different single letters on a word that have the same effect for what we want to be doing, but we have different experiences around them. So I'm going to give a quick example here of I recently stayed at the Waldorf Astoria, and there was some construction going on. And let me see if I can make this play. So this is pulling up to the Waldorf Astoria. And I don't always stay at these fancy hotels. It was my anniversary. So this is in the heart of downtown Chicago. They have this really lovely circle drive that you pull into, and you're on a busy street. People are hustling by. There's, unfortunately, beggars outside. There's people in suits and high heels going to work. There's people with their grocery bags. There's people doing all the things, but you step in and you immediately, there's a fountain, the lights, like you drive around. Like there's just like, oh, like that felt nice. Like I'm fancy. Look at me. So these are just a couple pictures I took while I was there. The lobby, the room, there's a nice bar that you could go down to, the pool, the view from the balcony. Like there's a feeling, there's a sentiment, there's a kind of a level of excitement because I didn't necessarily expect all these things. I didn't know our room had a balcony. I mean, you can look that up, but I didn't know it was going to have this great view. Those are things that TripAdvisor and all those things try to help capture the experience and share the experience design. But I was happy about all the things that I saw. And then it was weird. I went into the bathroom, and this is weird to have pictures of a bathroom, but like you saw how fancy all this stuff is, right? Like we drove through this, we saw it, we felt it, we see this, and then we go into this bathroom. From this angle, not bad, looks nice. It's kind of their common bathroom. This wasn't the bathroom that was in the room. It was by the pool. And first and foremost, huge compliments. So glad that they have a changing table. There should be in every public restroom everywhere, both men's and women's, rah, rah, like everybody's a parent, not just women. Everybody has to change diapers. Segue. They have this old school diaper changing station. Okay, it's not like it's a big deal, but it did look really weird. This is a really, really small, easy way to notice the experience, is it was like that plasticky material, and not saying they should have like a fancy metal something because that wouldn't be comfy for the baby, but there could be like a chrome outside with a plastic inside. Like I'm sure there are some of these that are made differently that it really like it's a big juxtaposition and a contrast in the feeling that the rest of the space curates. So that was the thing that was off. at the Waldorf Astoria. Now you can imagine anywhere I go, I'm constantly like, oh my God, look at this. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at this. What was really, really awesome was, I don't know if everyone can read this, so I'll read the sign here. It says, Waldorf Astoria, elevating elegance, pardon our dust. We apologize for the appearance as we are enhancing the hotel. All right, there's construction. There's construction everywhere. You read that, elevating experience, like, oh, I forgive you. You're going to make this better. I'm not even going to be there when it's better, but I felt like, oh, this is cool. Like, oh, you're making this nice for me. Like, it felt like it was something for you. It was the language. It was the fact that the sign wasn't just taped on the wall. It's in this fancy acrylic stand. They put a plant next to the sign. It wasn't just like shoved in a corner or like in the middle of the walkway or off to the side. It felt in line with everything else that I was seeing at the Waldorf Astoria. There was this sign that is just a piece of paper printed out, but they had a border on it. They have their logo on it. They made it feel official. So I show this because every touch point you have with a customer is actually a moment of experience design in a way that you can be mindful and thoughtful. The first way that we started to do this in digital communication was our email signatures. I challenge that a lot of times email signatures are now used in a way that we're asking for things from our customers and from people. Follow me, go to my website, do, this for me, which is normal. That's kind of what the path that digital has taken is. It's a lot of asking. I challenge us to think about how can we invite or delight our customers? What can we offer to them in this email signature? Of course, having whatever you need to have there, but that's a way that we can greet people right away by offering them something that is kind of showcasing your values, showcasing your mission, showcasing what your company is doing. So going back to what the experience audit is, I have this slide here so that we can talk through what we just saw with the Waldorf Astoria. Does anyone have an idea about what was good about their communication or have a feeling? If you were doing an experience audit and just had to do one line really quick for each of these, anybody have something you would say about Waldorf Astoria's communication? What was that? Thoughtful. Oh, I like that. I didn't even think of that word. All right, we're gonna run through this pretty quick. Thoughtful. Content. We didn't see what they were posting. We didn't see what they were sharing. We didn't see what they were saying out loud. But what I can attest to as the person who stayed there is that the pictures I took of the room matched and even exceeded my expectations from the pictures that I saw on the website. So what they were sharing set me up in a way that when I showed up, I felt even better about what was happening there. Community. You didn't experience this because you weren't there with me. Sorry, I'll invite you next time. But when we walked in, we were greeted by someone who opened the car door. We were greeted by someone at the front desk. People were talking to us in a way that was really nice to be a part of it. The people that were internally part of the community and the people that were externally part of the community were nice. It wasn't like there was a crazy crowded lobby or like there was no stress happening. That does happen when you spend money on different things and you're looking for that elevated experience. But now we just heard that elevated experience. They communicated that in their language. So now even if you hadn't thought about that when you walked in, it's now in your mind. Now the more you look around, you're noticing those little things. Competition, we can talk about any hotel that you've been to otherwise and kind of benchmark against any nice, fancier hotels that you've gone to and think about what they might have done to invite you to be delighted. They might have done differently when you walk in. You know, you used to always get the chocolates on the pillow. Now it's like, yeah, okay, if you want to have a clean room, tell us because we're not going to clean it every day, right? Like when I walked into my hotel here, like, oh, no, don't expect this. I was like, oh, okay. Like I wasn't actually needing it. I don't feel like I need to clean my room every day. I don't do that at home. Why would I need to clean my room every day here? But it was interesting, like the way that message was delivered. Or I showed up and there was no early check-in. Okay, I get that. But then they're like, oh, okay, we'll call back in an hour. We might have it. I'm like, okay. It's not like your lobby is super crowded. You could probably call me, like, whatever. Those were little things. So if we're just talking quick competition. And then culture, they understood that where they were at in downtown Chicago is hectic. It's chaotic. The street is busy. There's a hustle and bustle. So this is not an easy thing to do, and they have a ability to have been owning that property for a long time. But that driveway was to me a huge understanding of how to have the culture, what's happening in the world, kind of not be top of mind when you drive into the space. my worries sort of melted away as you drive up and that fountain was there. How are we having those opportunities to allow people to drop the bags that they're carrying? It's not baggage, because that feels kind of shitty when you say that, excuse my language. But like, we walk around and say someone has baggage, it's like it's my fault. No, like, we're all carrying bags. We all have stuff in our lives that we're carrying, whether it's good, bad, whatever. How do we allow the bags to be set down so that we can share a moment, we can share an experience together? So that was a quick audit. You can use the same framework and think about any interaction you have with a customer. The overarching goal of this is to elevate it to your full business and your full kind of professional interactions in your suite that you're working with. But you can use the same framework on how you're just emailing with people. Okay, how do all these things feel? You can use the same framework with your social media. You can use the same framework with the office. I did an audit for a co-working space. This is just an aside, and let me check time to make sure we're doing okay here. Oh yeah, we're good. I did an experience audit with a co-working space that was just opening up. This was also in Chicago. That's where I'm based, if I didn't say that. And they have 3 or 4 locations in New York, a location in Miami, California, and everywhere had its own kind of pull, its own kind of thing. But the Chicago location, they were like, wait, we can't get people in. It was right after the pandemic, so as you can imagine, co-working wasn't real hot at that moment. People weren't really excited to be sharing workspaces. But I walked in, and their website and their fundamental brand promise was design. Very, very upscale, felt like a boutique hotel. Everything you looked at, their Instagram is stunning, 20,000 followers. It was all these things. But I walked around, and the littlest thing was all the office doors were glass. And I'm sure this was something that housekeeping did as they went through the space. All of the trash cans were the first thing you saw in every single room, because it was convenient for housekeeping to step in, just grab it and dump it, step in, grab it and dump it. Well, while that's convenient to housekeeping, when I'm walking through this space that's touting design, and I'm now looking, the garbage is an eyesore. Even if it is a nice garbage can, if that's the first thing you see, talk about bias, talk about subconscious, talk about your 2 selves, system 1 and system 2. Not everybody would be able to articulate that that was something weird or even really notice it. But if you remove it, similar to driving by that clown on your like autopilot moment, things will be there that you don't see. But if someone talks to you about it and you learn to articulate kind of the nuances, you'll feel differently in that moment. So I walked through the space with someone, and then I had them walk through the space again. Like, yeah, it feels kind of, I don't know, something different. Like, there's just little things. Or I moved a couple plants around too. I did a couple little things. But it was like, all right, just tweaking the way that the layout of a space is. The flow into a room is another great example. Are there things impeding my progress to get to where I need to go? And is it intentional? So you see a lot of this in like interior design work, and my favorite resource for organizing my house is Pinterest, because I'm like, what's a good layout for a new rug in a living room with a couch and 2 chairs? And you can see the placement. They talk about it with curtain length. Little things like that change the dynamic of the room. We know this from lighting, but how often do we think about the lighting in our office or even the lighting in our home? I'm very, very intentional because lighting affects me a lot. So all of the switches in my house have dimmers. I have different color lights to turn different things, because I've realized, because I'm really sensitive, it changes my mood. It's crazy if you start to pay attention to those things and then be like, oh, well, maybe if I just shift this and see how I feel. A friend of mine laughed because I have different candles that I use at different times a day. I know, you guys, I take this, you all, excuse me, I take this to the extreme. But it was, I couldn't focus, I couldn't get work done. So I finally was like, okay, when I light this candle, this means it's working time. When this candle is blown out, I'm gonna light this one so there's a different smell, it's a different experience. And she laughed, she's like, just get to work, stop worrying about these stupid candles. I was like, yeah, I know. Wouldn't it be nice if I could have just got the work done? All right, I had to find something, I had to find a trigger. So it's those triggers, it's those little things that seemingly might be imperceptible when you walk in a lobby. If there's a nice scent, you don't wanna be overpowering with it, but there's little things that you can do. You notice a bad smell, but if it's like a really nice smell, you're like, oh, hey, how's that? I'm fancy, I'm in a place that smells good. Little stuff makes a difference. How are we doing on time? Do we have do you all, now because I said I wasn't going to do it, it's the first thing that's coming out of my mouth. Do you all have some questions? Should I take a moment and pause, or should we just go through another example? All right, we'll go through another example for a second. Oh yeah, go.
Maybe one, so again, I think so we're professional services. So there's certainly like in a hotel, airport, it's a bit more transactional. But where professional services, there are a ton of transactions.
Longer tail.
All the time. And again, there's a lot of touches coming from a lot of different people. Again, I think, we try to set expectations of what each one of those engagements.
Absolutely.
But again, it's really hard to process every individual that's dealing with that client. So I guess I'm trying to ask a question here. What are some good practices in a professional environment where you can maybe somewhat build a process there? I mean, certainly onboarding, we have some processes built there. There's so many little interactions.
Absolutely.
It's really hard
to map them all and to understand each and every one and how they interact. So quick recap, how do we apply this to professional services when there are tens to hundreds to thousands of touch points that we have with a single customer over a week, over an entire relationship, over the ebbs and flows? So why we use hospitality, or I use hospitality, is they're good, easier concepts to understand quickly. But from that perspective, a good exercise might be truly acting as a client and interacting with all of your touch points. So taking yourself through your company's process, somebody or a couple people, and seeing how do you receive this information? How do you receive these emails? What does the user experience feel like? I think that's the biggest gap in some professional services firms is we tend to backburner things like our website or our social media because when we work with our clients, they don't go there. But that is the first place that is the resource for them to find information. So how can we flip and make our website or our social media a hub as a response? There was a nice presentation earlier, and I know it was one of the recorded ones. It was UX to CX about website development, and she went through how she took her architecture firm's website and flipped it to answer her clients' questions, which then ended up becoming business development. But I'm positive, I can say with 100% certainty that any of their current clients that go to their website now feel better because they can find their answers themselves rather than having to call or email. So it's creating opportunities for convenience while also thinking about the fact that they want to have that time still to engage with you. They're not remembering only that it didn't take them time. They're remembering that it didn't feel hard, that it didn't feel complex, that you allowed them to actively participate in finding their answer and make a choice. We all like to be involved in the process. Well, in professional services, many times it has become, in marketing speak, we do everything for you. We're end to end, and that's great. Those are, wins, things that we want to talk about. But at the end of the day, we can't do everything for a client. They need to participate. And if they're not participating, then it's not as good of an experience because they're not buying in with us along the way. So I would challenge kind of flipping the script and quite literally have one of your teammates, have one of the account managers treat you, or yourself and your colleague, your partner, treat you like, okay, if I was going through this, what are all the things I have to click? Do all of your links work? How frustrating is it when one of the links doesn't work? And it's like so tiny because it's so hard to find. If you made this massive, beautiful playbook and documented all these things and one of the links was off, it's that pain experience again. One of the links in there, if there's little things that make it hard throughout, we remember that it was hard. And so it doesn't get used, no matter how good the work is. So look micro first, and then start to go macro. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. We've implemented our CXM, our client experience manager. Partly to help handle this, there's less touches from multiple people where there's that one person that gets to know that client.
Yeah.
And I think about this too as well. This small person I'll tell this long story, but wife hit a deer with a car, needed a new car. We found a car that she has pretty she wanted. So this car happens to be in Charlotte, 2.5 hours away. We call, make a deal. Here's our information. Plan is get there, get the key, get the car, come home. This is 2.5 hours away. We leave in the afternoon, get there. They want to welcome us to the dealership. She's some coffee. How do we come back here, I'll show you our service department. You need to, I live 2.5 hours away
Yeah.
in the service department. I won't pick up a car. And again, this is where they had programmed out that experience, and it was not the experience I was
Exactly.
pick up the keys, give you a check, and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is where we struggle, I think, sometimes where people think the same experience.
And that's perfect. Absolutely. So to recap, it was that you and your wife went to a dealership. You looked for a car. There was a specific one 2.5 hours away, bought it, ready to go, got there, really were just wanting to get the car and leave. And then they were very excited to welcome you. They wanted to make an experience for you. They wanted to give you coffee. They wanted to chat. So that's a perfect juxtaposition of, dropping things. Client experience. I lost one of the batteries, so this will be a little trickier. If anyone sees a battery around, we can grab that. Well, I don't think, oh, no, that wasn't the mic. Oh, no, it is just one battery. Oh, wait, hold on. Troubleshoot, real time, ADD distraction. Yeah, I think we're good. Maybe. Here, you can fix that for me and I'll answer the question. Car dealership, went there. They wanted to give you an experience. You were ready to just get on the road. That slide that we have that's client experience versus experience design, that's client experience. That was a script, a protocol. That was them doing it to you and for you, which is wonderful that they thought about that. It's really thoughtful. It's a great thing to do. And we all probably have done that to the point where we've sent too many welcoming emails to a client that we had a longer onboarding call with, and they don't need all that information. They just need a bulleted list. So how do we then accommodate? And that's experience design. What would have been a better situation is for them to have a phone call with you because they now know to find out that you're 2.5 hours away and then say, okay, great. We packed this to-go bag for you. It has some water bottles of coffee and a gift certificate for a restaurant that is in this place but also at your home so you can have a little meal on us when you get home. That's now taking client experience, which is what they tried to do, which is a great thing, and moving it to experience design because it's not the same for everyone because everyone's not the same. So we're constantly being considerate and inclusive. And, well, you have your CXM, I think you said, your client experience manager. We have that, but there's things that when you're in the weeds are complex. So that's where someone like me, you can hire as a consultant to come in and say, hey, what is the outside perspective on this? And there's other firms that do different things that could help. I'm not just saying I'm the only resource, but there's ways to kind of dig in further. And I have some resources that I can share. Just send me an email. I don't even think I put my email on these slides. I put my social media and my website. So let me know. I have cards. I can give them to you after. And we can talk more about your particular understanding. And I'm happy to still answer more questions because we have time. But I think that was a really cool example of that differentiator because we are still stuck in the world of client experience because it's a good thing. And I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing, but there's a layer on top of that. Think of business 10 years ago. We didn't even consider client experience. It was we do our job, we get it done, maybe 20, 30 years ago, and that was good enough. That was it. People just had expectations of wanting the service or the product. Now, we're much more active and engaged consumers. We have an expectation of understanding of our needs. And that's social media. That's because we're all communicating. That's because we have reviews and advisors sites and all the TripAdvisor and review sites and all these Amazons, whatever. So we can see what other people's experiences are. So now our expectations change because it's not just what you tell me, it's what everybody else said online about you, which we can't control. So now we have to understand what's the footprint, what's happening, but also elevate the understanding from a really what's going on in the entirety of the situation. And that's, well, seemingly very heavy and complex, can be done with a few questions. They could have, and I'm sure they knew you were traveling from out of town. There's a few things that they could have done. Exactly, right? And it was kind, right? And that's hard because, like, you don't want to be mad at someone for being kind to you, but it's kind, but it doesn't apply. Like, this doesn't work right now. All right, you had one more question? Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
how do you keep from getting wrapped around that? So a lot of people are
mm-hmm.
Eddie is probably the odd situation now. They typically have someone who's buying a car, and so for 85-90% of the time, it was the right move.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a conversation
I'm a paper person. I print everything. So
Deliver proposals in a custom box. It looked really great, really nice. We're like, okay, let's talk about this. Okay, well, we already know we're expensive. So if I deliver this custom box, am I sending a message like, oh, is this what my extra dollars are going towards? Or whoever's opening that box, it might not be the owner who's opening the box. It might.
so they don't have the experience.
I have to dispose of this box. This box is not sustainable. This, so like how I can argue myself different sides of that.
Absolutely.
I don't know whose experience it is that I'm delivering.
It's tricky. So quick recap is how do we not get wrapped around the axle, as you referred to it. A construction firm, she runs a construction firm, and there's competitors that are now delivering proposals, not just printed out and nice, but in these boxed experiences, and they're getting delivered and they're really fancy, but they have a higher price point. So how do they not evoke the feeling that, oh, well, now if they do the boxes, they're spending it on all this fluff, all this extra, all this swag that I don't actually need, and how do we then make sure it gets to the right person? And I think it's really part of the discovery process is asking those questions ahead of time. If you're going to send someone a proposal, let's say $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, you're having a lot of conversations with them. They didn't just like fill out on your website and be like, here's a document, right? You're getting to know them throughout the process. So if I send something over, who receives it? How do you prefer to receive proposals? Do you like a paper format? Is it something that you would like to have a little bit more of an understanding of how we do business? And so people might just yes your way through, but you're getting to know that person. So you're getting a feel for when they're just yesing you because they want to get off the phone and just get it done. In that case, they're either really busy, so keep it short, and then potentially delight them with a little surprise thing versus a big whole box of all of the things. Or they really just want the quick and dirty. They just want to read it. They want the numbers. They want to compare it next to the other one. So it's really about how we're actively inviting them to participate. Because it's easy. You totally can get wrapped around it. And that's because we're used to processes. And that's because we're trying to create optimizations and efficiencies, which are amazing. And we need that. 100% we need that. But remember that there's a space for optimization and efficiency, but that doesn't exclude getting to know someone and what they actually need. And while you should create optimizations and efficiencies in your proposal creation process, because that's an internal thing and it's a great experience for your employees, it makes it better for them, what we don't want to do is then make it harder for us to not have that one-to-one, that interactive point with the client or the customer. And it's really about asking those questions as much as we can and getting to it and getting to know them. And you'll start to get the vibe. Like some people are just digital people. I'm a paper person. I'm going to print it out if you send it to me so I can actually read it. But some things I want both because I want to be able to refer to it on my phone when I'm on the go. So if you send me this big thing, I'm having to like take pictures of it, I'm having to scan it. The easiest, nice experience design thing you can do is send the contract as a PDF as well as e-signature, because not everyone has a printer or a faxer, but some people really, really want to print it and sign it and feel a little bit more authentic about it. Then allow them the instructions of how to scan it back to you.
I think this also relates to your panel today with your customer that just want to type and build like straight up versus like I would love to get that fancy box and all the bells and whistles. So
Yeah.
we have said one size fits one. It's really about having the conversation, setting the expectations. But I mean that's hard to do.
Yeah, one size fits one is exactly kind of leaning back to your session earlier. I think it's important.
Yeah, exactly. Hold the ground one coming out. But to that point, I think, to your question, I think you do have a brand promise, right? This is our brand. So number one, I always say stay true to brand. I can't be the Waldorf and Motel 6.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
You're on Motel 6 or on Waldorf. It doesn't really matter which one you want to be. Now, you can have unique experiences as Waldorf or unique experiences as Motel 6, but you can't be all things to all. So to your point, I think, number one, I'd say 9 times out of 10 when we're sending those, I think we all know it's going to the procurement officer. Doesn't give a crap what it's in. And again, just more peanuts to throw away and package.
Yeah.
Not necessarily make a decision. But, if it is going to directly to your client, I think if your brand is we're bespoke, we're more expensive because we're that good. And you're going to get an experience, and I expect that experience to start from day one.
Yes. Experience starting from day one all the way through. There is an experience, and there's a clientele for the Motel 6, and there's an experience and a clientele for the Waldorf Astoria. And that leads really greatly into the brand promise idea that you just mentioned, and that leads to the kind of conclusion here, because we're coming short on time of just coming back together, is understanding that the core functionality of what happens then with the experience audit is that you need to know your values. You need to understand what your brand values are, what the values are of the people that work for you, the employees. And then to me, I think the persona game is like so dated. I've never been able to figure out the personas for my business. And that's because it's not a persona, it's a personality trait. It's just a single trait. For me, people who want to work with me are curious. They're curious about what could be if they explored something that seems kind of fun, but feels like a lot of work. So how do we unpack this? So that's it, and practicing active consideration throughout it. And that consideration can be just exactly that, asking those questions. Like, would you, and not so transactional, like, would you check this box if you'd like a fancy proposal, check this box if you wouldn't, but having a conversation about it. It could be part of a checkbox if you know that's part of the process. I'll just give you one quick more example on weird experience design things. I hate Calendly. Super convenient for the person sending it. It's good because it goes into your system so you can see if you're free, but it's never phrased in a way that feels nice. And I've actually really, really worked hard on my phrasing for if I send a calendar link, it's here's my link for convenience of scheduling. If nothing in there works, please let me know because I'd be happy to find a time that accommodates your schedule better. So I'm doing this because it's potentially convenient for both of us, but if you don't want to click that, or you just want to throw some dates and times at me. Calendly feels like I now have to do all the work when you ask me for a meeting. Wait a second. It's about how we're changing the language around it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an incredible software. Don't get me wrong. But it's about how do we actually create a proactive experience with that touch point of sending a link for someone to book a meeting. If you're saying now, book me. I'm like, okay, what are you, famous? I just book you. All right. So the core of all this is knowing your values and getting value alignment with that client, understanding what feels right for you both. And this is the best resource that I've found when it comes to exploring organizational values. Excuse the blurry picture. I just grabbed it off the internet about 2 hours ago. And Dare to Lead is the book. You don't actually have to read the whole thing. You can just go to this website, breneebrown.com/hub/dare-to-lead/ and the section is operationalizing your values. And it gives a list of examples. It gives practices on values versus behaviors. She goes through, there's videos, there's all these different things. It's really, really helpful. I actually used this, and none of hers worked for me, but I learned a new way to think about values and then found my own language to describe what works for me and for our organizations. So that was something that was really important. So the core of everything you're doing with your experience design is you can't just start looking at your emails or looking at your social or looking at what's going on without understanding what the feeling you're trying to create. And that feeling is about the things that you value. So for me and Forward, we value invitation and curiosity. We're inviting people to learn alongside us, and we're curious about how to build a world that feels more inclusive to everyone. So everything we do, I'm not saying I'm doing a great job. If you go to our website, we're redesigning it. No one's doing everything right, but everything we do, we try and lead with an invitation. We're not going to say, that's wrong. You can't say that. We're going to say, why did you say that? I'm curious to understand. Oh, well, have you thought about looking at it this way? Now, I unpacking the why, I'm getting curious, and I'm inviting you to do something a little bit different or think about it in a different way. So we talked about it. I put this up here in case we didn't get here yet, but we got here. We had our questions. So this is where you can find me. My email, I'll send it out, and you guys can talk. You all, see, I knew it was going to happen. One more time before we concluded. You all can bother me for a phone call. You guys, you all, I'm tired. It's been a long day. You all are invited to join me in an email conversation if it would be valuable to you. I would be happy to give you a card. Thank you, and we can make our way back to the main session.